Hi, hello everyone. It's Rob here. You know me from our weekly podcasts and our reviews. I'm flying solo today. No Ben with me, no Cameron, no Richard, unfortunately. I'm doing something a little bit different today. So recently, as long-time viewers of the channel may know, toward the end of last year and before the Series X came out, I was having issues with my Xbox One X, where it would overheat and it would just automatically power down. A fix for that online is to replace the thermal paste on the processor. And to do that, I have to take it apart. And I wondered whether maybe our audience might be interested in seeing me take this apart. So, that's what I'm going to be doing today. There'll be some jump cuts, there will be some speeding through for our viewers on YouTube, and I'll try and keep it relatively engaging if you are listening to this via podcast. So, without further ado, let's crack on. Right, here we are with my webcam set up here, and we've got the back face of my Xbox One X here. Now, I have a video that I'm going along with this, just to try and make sure that I don't actually break this console. Obviously, this was an original Scorpio edition console, so this is very much out of its warranty. I figured, well, if I can't fix it, I can't use it anyway, so why not? Let's see if we can get some more use out of it. So for this, you will need a screwdriver kit. I have an electric screwdriver that I have set up here. I've got some tweezers as well, so you need those for a few bits. Opening tools can come in useful, but I don't think they are mandatory or necessary for this. And I have some more lovely thermal paste here. I'm using Arctic Silver. It's been recommended to me as just a really high quality thermal paste that is great for processors of any type. I've got some in the PC I'm recording this on as we speak at the moment. So, right, let's crack on. So we've got all the ports on the back here. Okay. So a little membrane there, and you can see it's revealed a screw head behind there. Now, this is a Torx screwdriver head, so that is something that most of you may not have, so you'll need special little bits of kit for this. These screwdrivers are not super common. I'm looking at this and hoping I've got the right screw head, or I will be quite sad. Next size up. Okay, there we are. Right, so there we are. Now, this is a electric screwdriver. The theory will be that I don't have to do much of the turning myself, but obviously that can change. I'm finding it easier to do it this way around. Okay, so we take those off. We're going to lay this face down. You can see the case has come off a little bit first, so we pull it towards us. Oh. It has got some catches in the side. Okay, so it's to try and, if you want to try and fix this rather than break it, you need to try and make sure that you disengage the hooks. So there we are, and it opens up, and then this side disengages. It's these bits at the back here. It's this bit here. If I wait for my webcam to focus, it's that bit that was hooking in on the side. So we put that to the side, we keep it safe. I'll probably get the dust out of that. So we've got our first view at the inside of the One X here. So we've got obviously a nice little panel at the front, disk drive slot there. Okay, Right, it is quite dusty. I have not ever cleaned this, unfortunately. They're quite hard to clean the insides of these consoles. You can see lots of screws that we've got that we will need to take out in a specific order as well. So I'm not going to do anything. Obviously, I've got my guide video still going at the moment. So let's see now. We have this at the front. Okay. Right, so our next step is we need to take these silver Torx screws out. Now, a good way to do this and keep a plan of where they have gone is to lay them out on a piece of paper the way that they have gone in as. So as part of the kit with this one, they're quite long screws, aren't they, these ones? Quite long screws. Okay, so the way I'm doing this is that the electric screwdriver that I bought, this is actually a work one that I have borrowed for the weekend. I have a magnetic work tape that comes with it. So I'm just placing the screws in a rough approximation of this pattern, of this layout on the back of this console, onto the mat, so I can make sure I keep track of where the different screws are coming from in a logical order. So if I bring this over, you can see I have the two black ones there from the back of the case that you can just about see on the black mat, and then I've got this one long one here. So I'll make a little Xbox One X sort of rectangle there to try and make sure that I keep track of everything. Okay, so I'm going to crack on and get all of these unscrewed, and then we shall take it from there. Okay, so as you can see, all the screws, all the silver screws at least, on this have now been removed. So we just now need to remove the Wi-Fi module from this side, and we need to remove this module from the front. That does need to be done in a specific way, in a specific order. So what we will do, first we need to disable this clamp. It requires a smaller torx screwdriver than the other connections we've undone so far. So you just need to undo that. There we go. I've got my little organisation of screws, which I shall show you in a moment as well, because that's all very nicely laid out. Organisation when you're doing this sort of thing is key, I think. So there we go, I've got that. And this is just a contact. It's slightly magnetic, so you just unclip it like that, as you can see. So next up, we have our Wi-Fi module that we need to get rid of. Or need to undo. So the Wi-Fi module is actually this chip on this side of the console. For reference, if you're looking at your console, this is the side with the sync, or with the eject button on the front of it, the power cable, I believe. Oh no, it's the side opposite to the power cable on the back. So with this, we need to remove these three Torx screws, and then we lift it in a certain way to make sure that we don't damage the board. Okay, so I'm just going to do that. The screws aren't super done in, so you can see the Microsoft branding on the side. And we've got this black one here we're just going to remove. There we go. Okay. So you may want to lift from that part. That I would not recommend. You want to grip where it says Microsoft if you're doing this at home, and you just want to pull that out. And then we have one Wi-Fi module. So I shall put that down. I'm going to lie the console back down. I'll just show you the back of this. So this is the contact, the plug that goes into the side of the console, and that's the actual chip itself to do all the Wi-Fi. Okay, so we're going to put that safely to one side. We're going to leave it up there, and then we need to remove the chipset on the front. Okay, so the first step for this is going to be removing these gold torx screws. We need to take those out, and then we need to do something specific with that little ribbon connection, as you can see there. Okay. We are. Right, so got those three out. Now, with this ribbon connection, as you can see, you've got this going down here, and then you've got this little black box and the white box at the top. Now, you may think you can just grab and pull that out. That would be the wrong way to approach this. What you need to do is you just need to flip up that white bit at the back. Ooh, he says. There we are. Okay, and then what that essentially does is it undoes a clamp, because on the ribbon you have some metal filament areas which pins on the circuit board are trying to connect to. Okay, so what we can then do is we can lift this up. And pull that out. Okay, and that is also, you can see the connection on the back there, you can see the chip there. Okay, and we're going to put that to the side as well, keep that safe. So we are almost at the point where we can flip it over and open it up, which is very exciting. So the last four screws we need to remove are from the heatsink for the console itself. So it's these four black ones here. So I'm just going to remove those, and then we can turn the console over and have our first little peek at the inside of the Xbox One X. Okay, right, so what we now do is we flip this back over, so we've got the bottom of the console here, and as you can, I'm just going to slide that over quickly. You can see my little array of screws just here. You can see, obviously, these are the tall ones. They're all laid out in a rough approximation for how they were taken out. Okay, so what we do, can lift. See, the best way to do this is just ever so gently turn around and move things, because the last thing you want to do is break anything, because obviously, yeah, as much as I may not need this console anymore because I have my Series X, I do want to see if I can keep it in good nick. You know, there's no reason for it not to work still. So I'm gonna lift it up. This bit can be a little tricky. Okay, I'm just making sure that I've not missed any connections anywhere. Don't believe I have. Not missed any screws that I can see, because this has been a little stubborn. Okay, we are. So, there we go. So you can see that ribbon cable there, that goes up to the sync button on the front, with the eject button on the front. You've got the little sync panel just at the front there. This is the cable for the USB port that is at the front there as well, and that links up to the motherboard. You can see a little shade of dust there, which I shall clean before I put this back together. So I'm going to put that to the side. Then we have this. You can see our fan here now. Okay, as you can see, things have jumped ahead a little bit. So I've taken a couple of screws out of that top silver segment and lifted it off. I did unfortunately make one or two mistakes, which is why this isn't sitting exactly right, but I did want to just quickly show you guys obviously what we've got in here. So this here is the disk drive. You can see it's got this little just eye hook holding it on there. This is the power adapter brick. Okay, the power adapter brick here. Okay, so we've got the disk drive, we've got the power brick just here, and then this is the fan array into the heatsink here on the motherboard itself. So the next step will be for us to try and take some of these components out. So let's get cracking with that one. Okay, so to undo the disk drive, we're just going to take it off that eye hook and pull it forwards. We need to pull this off. This is just put on with some sticky. Okay, so it may not feel super sticky, but we do need to put that back on later, so just keep that safely to one side. You can see I've got my little chips up here. And then with this power supply, it's important that you lift it evenly. Okay, it's very important that you don't pull it from one side, you lift it with a finger in all four corners like this if you are doing this at home. So we pull this to one side, we need to unhook the wire from up top. We can place it there. So as you can see, we've now got the SATA cable, or the SATA cable here, and we've got another cable there for the disk drive, so we need to unhook those. So if you pull it out, there we go. You can do it with a hand on each side like that, it's probably a little bit better to do, but being a left-hander, I do find it easier having one finger just under the cables like this and just pulling gently but firmly. Okay, it's important that you don't yank, just try and make sure that you're pulling in a sensible way. Okay, there we are. So under here we've got the hard drive as well. You can see the inbuilt Seagate 1TB drive for the Xbox Series, well, the Xbox One X here. As you can see, this is where the motherboard isn't quite sitting right inside. So let us now try and disconnect that. Okay, so to disconnect this hard drive, what we need to do, we need to get this power cable just here. We give that another firm pull up, and then we have this SATA cable in here as well, just there, that we need to also disconnect. So I'm just going to do that. There we go. One hard drive. Obviously this is the 1TB. You can put solid state drives, you can modify the console and put solid state drives in here instead if you so choose. It's something that I wouldn't recommend doing unless you're very confident with this sort of thing, and you would need a way to put the Xbox OS onto the console again. I'm not sure of a way to do that myself, but I'm sure there are guides online if you did want to have a look into it. So next step is the fan assembly. We need to remove that. You've got a power cable just down here, as you can see, so we just pull that out and then lift the fan housing off. Now you can see inside there, that's all the fan. You can use like an old dry toothbrush to try and clean that up. I'm probably going to try and clean it up a little bit because there's a little bit of fur and cat hair. I wonder who from. So we put that safely to the side as well and keep it safe for later. So this is the heatsink for the console. Okay, that's where the heat gets dissipated into and essentially not stored necessarily, but is channeled into. So I'm just trying to make the motherboard sit flat again. There we are, that'll be nice and easy. So you can see you've got all these circuitry patterns on here and you've got these different components and things, which I do find this quite interesting, I must admit. You know, this is quite an interesting thing because we don't get to see the inside of these machines. We use them every day for years and years, but we don't get to see what goes on inside them. So I do find this quite interesting, which is why I thought you guys might as well. So what we will now need to work out is our next step on where we are going to go next in getting all of this taken apart. So let's see, shall we? Okay, so to try and start detaching the heatsink, what we need to do is you grab it by the heatsink and you lift the motherboard out of the housing. Okay, this is the bottom of the pad. You've got another thermal pad there for this processor. You don't have to replace that, you can just put a little dot of thermal paste on there. The key with thermal paste is to be quite sparing. You don't need loads of it because it does spread out quite well and makes a very good conductive surface. So you need to try and make sure that you don't put too much. You can just put a little dollop on there, which should be fine. So I'm going to take that away. I'm going to put that down there. And then what we need to do, if we place the motherboard down on the heatsink side, okay, so it's resting on the heatsink, and then it's this X clamp here. Whilst I wait for my webcam to focus, because it is determined that it is not wanting to focus up on the motherboard. See, it's this X clamp here that we need to try and disconnect. There's a specific knack to doing this, okay? It can be a little finicky. Force is definitely not, brute force is definitely not the way forward with this one. So let's get this all disconnected now. Okay, right, so I've got one of these X-clamp corners unhooked already, just as a mode of practice, so I can show you what needs to be done. So, this is quite a tricky process. What you'll need for this is a flathead screwdriver and some sort of pointed tool. Okay, so see, I've got this tool here. Now, what we need to do is we choose a corner. I'm going to choose this one. Put the pointed tool in the gap just before the screw. You've got the screw there, you've got the little gap here, this small gap that you just put the pointed tool in. You lean it toward the side of the clamp that you are looking to disengage. So I'm looking to disengage this side of the clamp. You lean it towards that, you take the screwdriver and you just flip it up. Now that was quite a twanging sound because these are under tension. It's to keep everything attached. So the same happens then for this side, so we do the same. Actually, let's once you have those two, it becomes significantly easier to take off. You've got this little clamp here. Okay, right, so now that has been taken off, move my sharp tool to the side, and I believe our next step is to turn around and start disengaging these screws here. So we will get the method for that, and then we will get that detached. And there I was completely mistaken. Our next steps, we flip the motherboard back over and we pull the heatsink off. There we are. So you can see these are some adhesive pads on there. The heatsink is quite a heavy piece of kit because of its denseness of metallic components. So you can see the big network of metal veins in there. You can see my thumb just through there. Is to try and make sure the heat is channeled effectively. So as you can see, we've got leftover thermal paste there. I think this is my problem with this, is that it's the thermal paste has expired and it's just not very good anymore. So you can see there you've got the little discoloration, you've got the grey gel there, and you can see this is the processor, this is the guts of the 1X here. So you can see that I'm going to put the heatsink there. You can see there obviously of its housing and how it's connected. The gel on there isn't in great condition, so that I reckon is why this is continuing to overheat. So what we can do is we can get this all cleaned up, okay, and then we can begin the reassembly and hoping and praying that the console still works. Right, so I'll get started on that and we can take it from there. Okay, now as you can see, I have cleaned up the processor a little bit. You can see it's all showing, you can see the reflection of my webcam in it. There is a little bit of thermal paste left around the side of the processor. Obviously, it's virtually impossible to get into all of the nooks and crannies for this. So you do have to be very careful when you're doing this. Now, you can get some special paper, special towels, and you can get some special alcohol spray to try and get this clean for you. That's what I used. I'll put a link in the description below. Okay, and I'm just making sure I've got a little bit of, just a small bit of loo paper just here. I'm just going to make sure that it's all dry and just make sure there's no moisture or anything. I've done the same to the back of the heatsink, as you can see here, and that's all fine as well. So now the next step will be where we need to grab our thermal paste and then apply it so we can begin reassembling. It's time to put this back together now. Okay, so Arctic Silver High Density Polysynthetic Silver Thermal Compound. This stuff is. I got this off Amazon. It was quite cheap. You can get full processor replacement kits as well. So what I will do is I will attach a link in the description for that as well. So you can make sure that if you want to do this with yours, if you're having the same problem, then you're going to be able to get this fixed as well. Right, so I've got my tube of thermal paste. I've undone the tip there, as you can see. Now it's important that you're sparing with thermal paste, but not too sparing. It's a very fine line to tread. So the best thing to do for this is to take your thermal paste. I'm going to use my tweezers, pointing tool. Start at one side and move across in a straight line from one side of the processor to another. Okay, so I'm just going to do that now. A little bit of Arctic silver. Just gonna go in a line like that. Okay, now this stuff is very, very conductive. Obviously you can see there's a little bit of space around the side, that's where the Xbox manufacturers, that's where their thermal paste ended up going to. I had a cap for this somewhere. That cap has vanished. Of course it has. Let me find the cap for the tube. So I have got the cap back on the tube. I'm going to put that to one side. You can see we've got the thermal paste there. Now you take your heatsink. There is a little bit of discoloration on the base of the heatsink here. You can get fluids to restore that. It's not something I'm doing. And then you want to make sure that this goes back on. Put it in. Once it's back on, do not lift it back up. Okay, so this is through. You flip it over. Because you've got all the contacts on there, you flip it over, because what that weight has done, it's spread that thermal paste from the line down the middle across the rest of the processor, which enables a nice firm contact between the processor and the heatsink, so it channels that temperature effectively. So we take our X clamp, you can bend it just a teeny little bit, the arms there to make sure it goes back on. So it's now essentially doing everything in reverse. So we need to get this X clamp, you hook it onto one side, push it on with your thumb. Oh. Move that around. Sometimes there's a little bit of a knack to it. You do need to make sure that all four of these X clamp arms do go on there. There we go. So that is the heatsink now reattached to the motherboard. Okay, so as you can see, you've got that on there, you've got the little blue outline there, that was the thermal pad, and so on, to make sure that's all connected. So we need the base of our Xbox. So we put that down. And we put the motherboard back inside. We are now basically doing everything in reverse to get this all back connected again. So what we will need to make sure we do is just follow the steps as we did. So next, I believe we need to put the fan on. You can clean up the fan. Obviously my fan isn't actually too bad. Definitely not the worst fan I've ever seen. I am quite prone to having cat hair because of podcast cat Arthur. His hair does tend to get everywhere, and I regularly have to clean the fans of my PC because it just sucks them up. So what we can do, things just tend to slide and clip into place because of how compact these games consoles are. A lot of these things only go in one way. All of these cables will only go in together. So there we go, I've got that power cable connected down there. Now we're going to go for the hard drive, so we just put that in its slot here. There we are. Just move around. You've got the SATA cable already aligned. It just slots back in like that. Got the power cable here. That just slots in like that. As you can see, I have removed the fan with the power of editing again, because you do need to make sure you have this power brick and this, specifically the power slot, put back in there and slotted into place. And then you can put on top fan unit. Okay, that can require a little bit of finagling and jimmying into place, so I have noticed. So it is important that you do try and make sure that that's through. Okay, and then you hook those cables back in there. So I'll go back over, so I'm making sure that's connected in there. There we go. So otherwise I won't be able to plug it back in, and that will not be fun. So that is plugged in there. Then we need to put this back in position. See, that's the connector for the power there. Once again, if you just make sure. Oh no, actually, that's not the way we did it. We have to place this on top here first. Put the disk drive SATA and the disk drive power. Oh, excuse me. The disk drive power back in there. Take this, slot it back on top, then move this back in position and put that there. Okay. Right, so this little area down here can be really, really tricky when you are reassembling this. That is something I would definitely advise looking out for. Okay, so I did have to take this one, everything back off, and put it all back on again, just to make sure that the power connector there was sitting properly in there, so we could get the power cable then plugged back in afterwards. So you can see we've got the channel for these braided cables here, got them hooked back into this corner as well, and you've got the eye hook there for the disk drive all in place. All the wires are connected, so now we just take this little bit of grey foam, put that back on the top. It may not be super sticky, that's fine. It is mostly just to keep those cables off the tray, so you've got that stuck on back on there. Okay, so let's spin this back around so it is facing us. We then need to get the top. Now this is also another tricky bit. So you can see these bits down here, they need to slot into, if I spin this around, they slot into this groove down the side here. That can be really tricky to make happen. So it is something that I would recommend that you take your time with. That seems to have slotted in just there. I'm just making sure this is going in properly all the way around. The trick is to not be too forceful with this. You know, firm but gentle. You know, you don't want to make any movements that cause a grinding noise or anything like that, because that will end up causing a bit of damage. Okie dokie. So obviously we've now got the metal box back again on here. We've got the two, obviously the ports and so on the side and the front that we need to get reconnected, but we do now need to start screwing everything back together. So this is where my lovely array of screws is going to come in very useful, because this is the point then where we obviously need to figure out, well, how does everything go back in the different places? Well, this is how. Okay, so we'll get these screws put back into the bottom. I believe one of them goes in there. Let's get that connected. Ooh. That connected back, and the other, I believe, goes in there. Okay, so that is in place. There we are. We've got all the ports lined up properly on the back there, so we can get this all plugged in. Put that down there, and then let us make sure that we're getting the next step correct as we move on to further reassembly. So the next component we need to fit back onto this is the base of the console, okay? So we've got this underpiece here. I'm going to wipe that dust off in a second. Remember this bit with the touch contact there, this bit with the feet on the bottom, okay? So we need to make sure that this goes on in a specific way, because yeah, it's going to then be okay for the disk drive. So we take that. I'm going to make sure it goes on properly. You might need to do a little bit of wiggling again. A lot of this is done by sort of touch and repeated gentle movements rather than anything firm and forceful, because you want to make sure that you can still use this as a disc-based console. Okay, so you can see on the inside there, you've got those there, which need to correspond with these here, so I have discovered. Got Arthur there offering words of advice, I'm sure. Okay, let's make sure that's going to slot on properly. Like I said, you might need a little bit of wiggling around for this one. Okay. Right, so I've got that hooked on nicely, okay. So what we then will need to do is flip the console on its base again. And if you've done it correctly, everything should be lined up. It should be nice and stable. It shouldn't move at all, or it shouldn't rattle or anything like that. Okay. So we've got this clip-on contact just here. I'm just going to put on there just so don't forget. We've got the little ribbon down the front here that we need to put on again, and we've got the Wi-Fi module that we need to reinstall as well. So what we'll do is we'll flip the console up this side, and we will put this long contact back in place. Now, what I found useful is if you just take a note with your finger on where this plug is, if you do want to put this all back together, keep your finger on top, and that's where you need to try and apply the even pressure to put this circuit board back in place. Okay, it's very important that you don't try and push down from like here or anything like that, because you'll end up breaking the circuit board. Okay, so we need to get this ribbon back in place. Now there is going to be a little bit of a knack to that, because it's Microsoft, of course there's a knack to it. So I've got my tweezers here and a flat tool here. So what we can do, I'm going to try and be a little careful. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to unplug that. I'm going to have Arthur, of course, pick now to start rooting around in the background. He has a box he's rather fond of. So you want to take this flat wire, you want to push it back into where it's got the black contact. You want to make sure it's as far as in it will go. Don't try and force it, because then it will get broken and the contacts can have issues. So there we go. You want to make sure that is as in as it's going to be able to go, and then lock it in place. Okay. Arthur decided it was a wonderful time to get into my waste paper bin beside me. When you do this, I try and recommend shutting pets out of the room. Can make life a bit easier. So there we go. You can see that is now strongly connected. I'm just gently, very gently pulling them out to see that's all now locked into place. You can then push that back in place. Then we have those 3 gold screws, the Torx screws from earlier, that we're just going to be now putting back into place. Next up, we need to do the Wi-Fi module on the side. You can see you've got the connector pin there. So once again, I'm going to suggest exactly the same. once you've got the circuit board in hand, make sure you notice where this connector pin, where this connector plug is, and make sure that you're turning around and not applying force anyway. You're applying any force very gently on top of where that connector pin is to push it back into place, okay? Because that's to make sure you don't cause any damage to the circuit board. So it will sit itself and align itself into the right place pretty much automatically as I start considering throwing my cat out of the room whilst I do this. And then we need to make sure that these go back, these screws go back in. Okay, so I'll do those, and through the power of editing, I will be back in a moment. Okay, we can see now we've got that black torx screw and the two silver ones back in place there. So let's lie the console back down here. So I'm going to put it with its front to me. Okay, we need to put the two screws back in here as well. So I've got my little diagram, or my makeshift diagram for all these screw locations. So that does end up making life significantly easier, because then you can make sure the screws that you took out are going back in the right place, because there's nothing worse than taking a technical piece of equipment apart, like a computer or a games console, and taking 10 screws out, doing it all up, and having one screw left over. There we go. So that's that touch contact back in place. Okay, right. So it is now just a case of putting, right, bring my little diagram in here, all of these screws back into this box in the right places. So I'm going to crack on with that, and through the power of editing, it will be done in a blink of an eye. Okay, there we go. All the screws, as you can see, are back in place. We've got these for around the heatsink here. We've got these all back in around the hard drive, and we've got everything back in everywhere else. The one tip I would give you about putting the screws back in over the heatsink specifically, it's just good practice, is to put them in diagonally. So start at this corner, then put that one in, then put that one in, then put that one in. As long as you're not going round in a corner, because it's all to do with it being pressure equalising. You don't want to put too much pressure in one place, because sometimes it can cause things to snap. That's more of a PC tip more than anything. Something that has been advised to me because it is just good practice, but it's something to get in the habit of doing. If you are intending on doing or want to do this regularly, well, you would, I'm not entirely sure, but it's just good practice for safety. I did the same with the hard drive and did those diagonally as well. Okay, right, so we are now in the position where we need the top of the console. We need to place that back in its housing as well. So this is going to be an interesting one, I'll tell you that much. Okay, so this, much like the bottom of the case, requires the little bits of finagling to slot back in, and I managed that really quickly. So that is now in. Obviously it shouldn't come up once it's hooked in place. And if you remember, we had to slide it forward at the beginning. Once you slide it back, and there's been no snapping noise or anything like that, because it should be that quiet that it just slots back in. When you lift it up, it shouldn't move. Okay, so what we then need to do is put our last two screws, these last two screws, back into the back of the console. So we're going to upend it again, and we've got one screw up this end, which I'm going to lightly put in there. Screw back in. Apologies for the screwdriver, it does sound a little bit like a dentist's drill. I do get that quite often when I'm having to do similar things to this for my job. So we've got the last screw coming in here to put that in place. Okay, sometimes these torx screws can be a little bit of or can need a little bit of a knack to them. So any good multifunctional screwdriver set should have all of the different screw heads that you need. Any more, you can order specific ones. There are specifications, I believe, online that you can get to make sure that you've got all the right connections. But any good set from Amazon should have everything you need to be able to do relatively simple stuff like this inside. So there we go. One reassembled console. I hope you guys enjoyed the look around inside as I did that. Thought as it was something I was doing, I would share it with everyone on the channel. The biggest test, of course, will be turning it back on and gaming on it this afternoon, which is something I do intend on doing this afternoon relative to my recording time, at least. Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on this journey with me whilst I undo and do a little bit of maintenance on my Xbox One X. Because it is the Scorpio edition, I thought rather than just consigning it to the void, I would give it at least a good old college try first. So I've had a very good, interesting morning trying to take this apart. I hope you guys have enjoyed me on the journey for this whenever you are watching it. Now, of course, this is the first of its type of content on the channel. Typically, as you know, we do video game reviews. We do weekly podcasts as well, and you can find all of those in our channel. If this has been of interest to you, please do subscribe. If you like hearing about a bunch of guys talking about their opinions on video games and video game news, by all means, subscribe to our channel, like our videos. You can find us on Twitter at Experience Kills. I'm Homeless Mr. Gibbs on Twitter. I'm Homeless Mr. Gibbs pretty much everywhere, to be honest. So you are more than welcome to reach out to me if you do want to talk about the inner workings or need any tips on taking this apart or anything like that. Thank you very much for your time watching this video through. If you have enjoyed it, give it a like, share it around with your friends if that's something they would like to see, and stay tuned to Experience Kills for some more great content. Goodbye, everyone.